Thanks for coming back. This is week 3. Put the agenda up here. We're gonna be concentrating mostly today on Tango is our theme.
We're gonna dance for you.
Yeah. Which is problems to be solved and skills to be taught. We'll go into that a little bit more in depth. First, I wanted to kind of review what we talked about last time, which was the thinking or lagging skills. And we had like the 5 different areas in which these we find these. So like it has to do with attention, organization, and memory. We have the cognitive flexibility, which has to do with being able to go with the flow. We have social thinking, which is relating and interacting with others. We had our language processing skill, which is using words, hearing what others say, and understanding what other people say with ease. And then we had our emotional regulation, which is keep calm, cool, collected. Do any of you guys do the homework exercise?
You guys picked the practice, huh? Also, we did hear that with all the other paperwork, it was kind of a lot. So,
I guess we could go around and just kind of like tell us I don't know. Well, you had a good question last week.
I was just kind of wondering in the course of the last week, given everything we talked about lagging skills in our last class, did this come up again? Were you thinking about lagging skills around your kids? Or were you feeling like, how much sense is this making so far? Do you have questions? Where do you feel like you're at with CPS and with understanding the lagging skills?
I think the language is what I'm trying to, because before we were trying to talk to say defiant, opposite,
disrespect.
Yeah. Those were the words that we were trained because those better than, oh no, he's just doing that on purpose.
Right.
So now I have to stop and think like, wait, what is it that's pointing here? Coming out instead,
right,
the descriptive part of it.
Mm-hmm. So we definitely are getting more into that today, so I think yeah, I hear you. I catch myself sometimes saying those things too. But it's not just about what we want to hear, it's about really,
being more specific. It's like the whole framework. And really looking specifically. It's harder.
But okay, but what does that mean? What does that look like? What is it that he's doing to be that way?
Yeah. That's exactly where we're kind of looking at backing up.
The other thing that came up,
Valerie?
For me personally, I'm having a hard time putting them together. Collaborative problem solving and what I do, and for it to make sense to me.
You guys do, is it PBIS?
Yes.
There's a whole, maybe we can find a slide on that because they talk about how they do work together.
Right.
So that's positive behavior.
Individual.
It's a lot of that start.
Okay. Well, one thing that's been coming up that in our last class, I think I mentioned, a lot of people in our yesterday class were late because they were dealing with crises with their kids. We have 3 people in that class that have given third-degree notices on their, they're dealing with some really rough stuff. And where they were kind of getting stuck with this is we know that it's a cycle of first we assess, we try to figure out what's making this kid tick, and then we plan how we're going to approach. And then we approach, and it goes on and on. And they're like, we don't have time for that. We need to know what to say and do in the moment when things are hard. So we spent a lot of time talking about that yesterday, and I think we're going to kind of talk about that in the next couple of weeks too, because we are still in assessment phase, and we're asking you guys slow down, don't respond yet, don't jump to a solution. But we know you need something to do in the moment, and that's where plans A and plan C come in. You either let it go, or because it's an urgent safety issue, you're going to do something to keep the situation safe, and then you're going to come back with all this assessment stuff when there's a minute to breathe. So that's kind of the pattern that we're aiming for. Anything else come up for anybody last week? Just kind of.
I had a really rough night.
You always have a rough
I
night.
was in the house until about 11:30, I think,
Yesterday? Oh, wow.
And so, what I'm having a hard time is because I can tell myself,
she doesn't have that skill at this moment, she doesn't have that skill at this moment, but when she's pouring a big glass of milk on my carpet on purpose, and squatting towards the dog, and those sort of things that are major deal breakers for me, I don't know how to put my emotion aside and and help her. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, because right then it doesn't seem like she needs help. It seems like she needs to help herself.
Yeah, okay, the other big thing we want you to walk away after all 8 classes with is your concern is just as important as the child's concern. It's not just about being all, poor darling, pouring milk, doesn't know any better. No. We don't want her to behave like that, and we need to stop her when she's doing that. But in order to prevent it from happening again and again and again, we're going to have to untangle that knot somehow. And in the moment, if you're heated, it's hard to figure out how am I going to approach in a way that falls under this empathy thing.
And what you'll get is more skills to be pre-processing these things, be able to read the kid a little bit better. You know how in NCI, they talk about the escalation cycle. So what? Yeah. It's we'll be working more on having these pre-conversations and really the assessment and planning. So hopefully, we're not saying this will never happen. You'll never have a glass of milk just be but we'll hopefully get to a point where you can kind of see where we're going, and we can figure out how we're gonna interact with it to help prevent these things from happening.
That's the hardest part, is interacting with it. How do you interact with it in the moment?
And then in that moment, whatever happens in that moment, yes, we want it to be as therapeutic as possible, but we also know you're human. And this is a real relationship between you and the child. You're going to be angry. The child probably wants you to be angry in a way, right?
Sure.
And so it's hard to slow down, but where the growth is going to happen is after that situation where you're teaching that child to have empathy for you, for what that felt like when she was doing that to your carpet and your pet. And you know what I mean? So it's kind of get through that moment and tag team it with your support if possible.
And
Or call us. And meanwhile, give yourself a break, because I think part of this is owning our own mistakes. There may not even be mistakes, just our own humanness. I think I've shared with you guys, I've had moments with kids that I'm not proud of where I got angry. I've had it with you. I need you to, you had a teen girl once upon a time. I told her to shut up. She was.
That's wrong.
But I was busy in my head. I had just come from a kid who had tried to jump out of a car on the highway. He was in the hospital, and I was all stressed out trying to figure out what was going to happen with him, because he didn't have any, his therapy supports were totally inadequate. And then I pick her up from school, and she's nagging on my car. She's nagging on how I'm dressed. I'm basically attacking me, you're embarrassing me at school and all this stuff. I'm mouthing off in my ear in the car. It's a 5-minute drive from her. And I was just stop. I don't think I told her to shut up, but I was stop now. Knock it off. I was mad. And that actually worked. She was whoa, what's wrong with you? I was let me tell you what's wrong with me. I'm super worried about something else right now. I understand if I embarrassed you, but I've got a kid in the hospital that I'm totally worried about. I'm not saying he's more important than you, but that's where I'm distracted, and I don't need your heat right now. And she actually later, when we got to the club, she was well, so what's going on with him? Okay. And so I was whoa, no, she meant it. She was okay. The world is actually bigger than me. Wow. So anyway, we all say things that, we're not proud of in the moment maybe, and then later we come around, and she okay, I'm sorry that I said that to you. I was really stressed that day, and what was happening between us didn't feel good. And I would love to work on this with you. If you ever have calm moments, you can do that.
Yeah, we do. And that's the thing, it's it's a topical thing. We've sat down and said, okay, you have triggers. Here's my triggers.
Yeah, good.
And we've said that. And so, she knows she can't hit stuff in the hallway because I'm an apartment complex manager, and my kids have to be, to a certain standard. And so instead of hitting the building, she took the other youth into the hallway and started to try and pick a fight with her. And then classifies it as, well, you said I can't hit the wall. You know what I mean? And so it's like...
Pop quiz, what lagging skills are we dealing with?
Cognitive flexibility.
Yes.
And that's it. And that's it. And so then it was like, last night we had somebody with a stomach upset in the bathroom, so we put a sign that said, no showers tonight. So what does she do? She purposefully grabs her towel and says, I'm going to go take a bath. Right? And so it's like...
Was it US talking to? Or it might have been Lee. Like, where, like, there's, like...
Well, that's the link. No.
Yeah, like, no, like, every single explanation that this
That's
girl
it.
has is, like...
We need a manifesto.
There's, like, a different rule to, like, outside. Like, one rule, like, you say, like, please do not, like, we don't hit people in this house, so then they'll check the dog.
So she wants to be an attorney with
That's what I
Very,
said.
very
Why are
justice
you going to
based.
nursing school?
It's funny. I can see how that is really frustrating.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a matter of having supports and getting through it, and then remembering this process, we can't necessarily get our concerns and our needs met right then and there.
Right.
It's a much slower and longer process. If we try to get our needs met in the heat of that moment, it's going to go nowhere, because what she's looking for is that battle. You know?
And so, like, that's what slow social lagging is still there, too, right?
Attention seeking
Yeah.
too, you know?
But don't you have a couple of foster children?
I have 2 girls.
So what is that doing to the other child?
What's very cool is that this kid used to behave that way also, similar behaviors, and she's able to see herself in that scenario and go, oh, that doesn't look so cool. You know what I mean? Like she, even just last night, she said, you know, did I look like that?
She's learning
Through others' experience, which
Yeah.
that's a huge skill, you know what I mean? To be able to,
Empathy is really
yeah.
Let me ask all of you, what do you do when you have a kid that's starting to really get to you like that? Like, what are your options?
You have to know your limits, though.
Yeah.
You have to know
Yeah,
your
I
limits.
called the other rest of the person, like, come and help.
Get some respite, get some space,
I
and
locked the
just,
door.
like, I need to get away from you as much as you need to get away from me, you know? It's respite for you guys, too.
tagging method. I mean, that's what we need. And not to say, like, your home should need to be set up like res, but, like, I mean, I know that when I would work res, like, I would have people on the floor with me where I'd be like, you know, Camille, you're going to get this one because I got to go to the
I already
office and
know
take
I
a break.
can't handle battery clock stealing.
Yeah.
Actually, I love that kid. I was the one that was like, she's all right.
Or like when I talked with Lisa and Vince, because I used to be their family care coordinator, like, and I was like, Lisa, you need to have like a sign for your family, like whether it's like, you know, a word where you're like red and like everyone like, you know, does their little thing and Vince takes over, or like yellow is like everyone goes away and you take over, like those are things that will be helpful. And if you know you're a single provider, having a respite person you can call over, those sort of supports in place are going to be helpful.
And what you're talking about, your example, and the other examples as well, are problems to be solved. Like, we don't have the answer. What do I do? I'm totally stressed. Let me analyze this through the 2 to Tango process.
Good segue, Margaret.
It's a very corny way to say, this is not our terminology. This is Think Kids. We love you, Think Kids. I'm recording.
Yeah.
It's kind of corny, but the point is that there's always this and always this anytime we're looking at how to address a behavior. When we're assessing how to address a behavior, you don't just look at the problem, you don't just look at the lagging skill, you look at the relationship between the two. We're going to talk about how to do that.
Yeah. Mantra today, it takes 2 to tango. And really what we mean is like the relationship between problems to be solved and skills to be taught. So 2 to tango, in quotation marks, is part of our assessment phase. So we're still here, and it's really helping us lead into the planning phase. So these are 2/3 of like, you know, what we do prior to the intervening. It refers to the important relationship between the two things, problems to be solved and skills to be taught. And it's really important that we look at both of these things. We look at the problems to be solved and the skills to be taught when assessing behaviors through the CPS lens and when we're planning our approach. Okay, so before we approach the child about the behavior, we still need to explore situations in which the child tends to have the most difficulty. And so what we're looking at are the problems to be solved and the specific expectations that the child will struggle with. These are the who, what, where, and when that are hard for the child. And another way to think of it is like what people, places, or times of day are hardest.
These are the triggers,
Right.
right?
Are there clear, predictable patterns? And even if you don't think of it like, you're like, oh, it just doesn't seem like there's a pattern. Can we look at it from a different way where we can find a pattern? Because sometimes we get stuck in our thoughts and we're like, there's no pattern, it's just random, but like maybe like talking to other people, like, and they might be able to see.
Yeah.
Oh, it's mom that's doing this, and that's why it happens at different times of the day. Or, oh, you know, it's like when we're in a public place where there's a big crowd of people, because it happens at school, the grocery store, and Boys and Girls Club. You know?
Like Shannon's kid, looking closer at the incident with the milk. What time of day was it? Who was around? Like what was?
Oh, I know the exact trigger.
Yeah, yeah. That's it. That's it. That's what we want you to do is know those things, and then we look at the other piece and we look at them together to figure out what we're going to do.
So the other piece is the skills to be taught. And these are what we think is our hypothesis of what might be positive behaviors. So this is where we put on our scientific hat and we are going to do some guessing. These are the why those expectations and triggers are hard for that particular child. This is where we're looking at like which skills are missing. And if the kid had those skills, what would the behavior stop? Sound good? And so this is part of our assessment process still.
And there's something in your folders that looks like this. And this is just our own guideline, like just to this isn't a form you're going to have to fill out for the rest of your life. We weren't able to start or anything, but it's just our way of brainstorming. We're going to list the problems to be solved on one side, the skills to be taught on the
On the
other.
other side.
Session 3 on top, and then it, and the point is just to make sure you're looking at both things.
A pen?
Me too, please.
Yes! One second. Oh, we have one. We got them. Yeah, got it. That was great. So this is still part of our assessment process, like I said. And this is where we would write out a list of problems to be solved and skills to be taught. And this process helps us do three things. And I would even say four. One, it's going to help us slow down. It's going to help us really look, in depth. It's going to help us break down a large overarching behavior theme like manipulation or defiance, and really get specific.
When,
Yeah.
where is key defiant?
And then it also helps us identify patterns and triggers that may be occurring. Like I said, it helps us narrow down to something specific. So instead of like a big broad theme, we're looking a little bit closer. And it's also going to help us prioritize what to work on. So you may have like, let's say you're kind of looking at like a behavior of a child or a situation, and it may break down into three different things. And you can find like, which one am I going to work on now? Which one am I going to work on later? And we talk about more how to do that in the planning phase. When we get to that. And like I said, basically it gets us ready for the planning part of this and how to approach the intervention. So there's a flow of how this goes. And I'll show you, I'll break this down with using an actual example. We have overarching behavior. We break it down to a specific problem to be solved. And then we look at the missing skill. So here's the example for it. The behavior, shoving peers. So that's broad. The problem to be solved would be the waiting in line. So that's when it
Turns out when we looked a little closer, it seems like he's only shoving when he's having to wait in the line. Okay, so now we know a little more.
So then the missing skill would be he doesn't know how to ask people. I always do this. Not to stand so close. Does that make sense? Margaret's going to break it down like 5 different ways and 5 different times. So
and we're going to do this together. We have a vignette that we're going to analyze together, and this vignette is actually going to be what we practice Plan B on over the next few weeks and stuff. So you kind of really get a sense of here's all this kid's issues, and here's how we're going to approach each one and balance and juggle each one.
So this is just some examples of where we can get this helpful information when we are playing detective, scientist, whatever it is. I always get, there's a show called History Detectives. I always get the theme song stuck in my head when I'm teaching this. Anyways, so here's some places where you can find information on what tends to be hard for the child. The thinking skills assessment, which we talked about last time, the behavior assessment that Maple Star does. Psychological evaluations, new and old. Old service plans and current service plans, because they'll probably list some information. Talking to people who know the child, this could be therapists, mentors,
Old foster parents,
yeah,
bio parents,
DHS workers, lawyers,
Crazy
CASAs, crazy. Also, your incident reports are going to be very helpful in terms of finding patterns and triggers, as well as your log notes. That's going to be very helpful. Talking to the FCC about what they're getting from the child as well. Talking to the child themselves. Sometimes you'll have a kid that does have some pretty strong language processing, and they can be like, oh yeah, I'm triggered by dogs because my mom had 45 dogs in our house, and they really scare me. Sometimes they won't have such good language processing skills, so it might be when you're having that interaction and you're observing their behaviors and their interactions with you is where you're going to learn this information.
like you've got a kid that's just saying, I don't have any problems, I don't want to talk to you.
Okay.
Like, they're still showing you lagging skills, so that's an assessment tool.
So this is important, and we are going to hit this on the head like 5 billion times. But the problems to be solved will always include specific people, places, and things rather than blanket judgments. And these are the details that we need in order to assess the why or what skills are missing. And then
A lot of important stuff.
this is important. This is important. Was this your turn now? So this is skills to taught will always relate to one of our 5 lagging skills, which I reviewed on the board and it's also here.
And
you can also pull out that
have
sheet.
this handout from last time. It's called Session 2 Thinking Skills Reference Guide. And this is going to come in handy when we're doing our little exercise because we're going to be asking you what lagging skills you're seeing in this kiddo.
So this is the why. Like, is it executive functioning skills that have to do with attention, memory, and organization? Is it a language processing skill that has to do with talking, listening, and understanding? Is it an emotional regulation skill that has to do with keeping calm, cool, and collected? Cognitive flexibility skill that has to do with going with the flow? Or is it a social thinking skill that has to do with interacting and relating to others? And what we were talking about earlier is that most kids are a mixture of all of these. Some may be more dominant, or you can really see that this kid has no language processing skills. But they, their executive functioning skills aren't there. But that's not what I see when I first look at them. So
Once in a while we get a purebred.
we're talking.
Feed my animal. Terrible. But usually it's a mix. And it could be, you may see a behavior that at first you think it's a problem interacting with other people, but then you figure out it's a language thing. The more closely you look, and the more the problem happens over and over again, and you're assessing it over and over again, you're like, wow, here's the actual pattern. It's that he can't put his thoughts into words. It isn't that he can't relate well to others. It's that this lagging skill is interfering with this ability. You know what I mean? So you figure it out.
They all interact with each other. There's going to be different, I don't want to say ratios of which is more prevalent in a child, but they all interlace, they all interact, and right now we're taking guesses, and that's okay.
So this is where I
Here you go.
Okay, so here's a little chart for you visual learners to help you really understand it. So on this side is all the problems to be solved, and this side is the skills to be taught. This is the who, what, where, and when. So which expectations seem especially hard for the child? Who does the child struggle with? Where and when does the child seem more triggered? When do they have the skills and when do they not? And what patterns do you see repeating themselves? And in terms of the skills to be taught, these are the why. So why do we think these things are happening? Which skills does the child seem to need in order to meet your expectation? And which skills does the child seem to need in order to handle being triggered? We may not be able to change some of the things that trigger them, like their caseworker is leaving and they're getting a new caseworker. We can't do anything about that, but what skills would they need to not fly off the handle about that, right?
Is this making sense so far?
Yes.
So, remember from last week, we took our dead-end explanations and we rephrased them, right? Things like, he's manipulative, she's oppositional, and we turned those into more about lagging skills, right? It's kind of what we're doing today as well. So let's just walk through this. When we're describing behaviors, we're not going to say things like this anymore. And this kind of, Letty, was what you were talking about. We're going to ask who, what, where, when, and why. Okay, so we're being told this child is manipulative. Who, where, when? Well, here's my example. He took money out of my purse to buy a soda instead of just asking me for it. She stole the batteries out of the clock. You know, these kind of things. That gives us a little more to go on to figure out over here what is the lagging skill associated with that.
It's easier to help figure out how to build a skill when we're that specific.
It's easier to build a service goal around this than it is around this.
He will not be manipulative.
This is the pattern. He started, and he didn't just steal money out of my purse. He also took the tomatoes out of the cupboard and he poured them in his room. Okay, so we're noticing a pattern where he's taking things and not asking for them. You could call that manipulative. You could call it oppositional. You could call it whatever you want. But the pattern we're seeing is he's taking things without asking, and that's the goal we need to work on, because that relates to a lagging skill about being able to vocalize what he needs, understand that stealing the food causes problems for other people in the house, things like that. There's lagging skills. And next slide is we're going to look specifically at what lagging skills are associated with things on this side. So another example. She's oppositional. Well, who, when, where, what? Well, so the teacher is saying she's oppositional because she runs out of math class when she gets frustrated with their interactions. Something about the teacher, something about math class, something about class after lunch. That's what we're starting to see. Is like there's a time and place that she's acting oppositional. He likes to push my buttons. Okay, tell me more. What do you mean by that? Well, he taps my shoulder and over again when I'm trying to cook dinner. That is irritating. He knows it bothers you, and you're going to get frustrated, and he knows that. This is how he's getting your attention. There's a lagging skill there, right? He doesn't know what else to do. She tries to control everything. Well, what does that mean? Where and when? Well, when we're driving in the car, she insists that people sit in the same seat every day. She can't handle it, like, she has to be in the middle or something like that. Okay, so now we're dealing with a specific time, place, people involved. So we can identify the trigger a little closer. She has to have her way. Well, what does that mean? That's a very broad thing to say. Does she always have to have her way? Is there a time and place? Well, so it comes up during family meetings. Fairness is a trigger for her. She gets on the soapbox about, like, people, you know, the two kids in the house. She has to have what they have or something. So getting more specific. So taking those explanations, okay, we are going into how does that translate into a lagging skill. You guys following me here? Okay. So he took money out of the purse to buy a soda instead of just asking for it. What lagging skills might that be related to?
And this is going to be a little bit backwards on your
I
PowerPoint.
changed the order
We
to
reordered
make
it.
it more sensible. So I just myself, I could see maybe some social thinking problems there, some language processing. He doesn't know it's okay to just ask for the money, and like you might say no, and maybe that's the problem. Is he's afraid you're going to say no, and he might get upset. So maybe it's an emotional thing. I mean, the point is, this is where we hypothesize it might be one of the lagging skills. Okay, and then we're going to actually talk to the kid and look a little closer and collect some information to find out more. The issue with the teacher, like we will only get so far with that without talking to school personnel to find out more information. Maybe she's just misunderstanding the teacher and can't see another point of view. That would be a problem related to that. Okay. Or maybe she doesn't know how to put her thoughts into words when she's frustrated. So you see how they kind of connect to a lagging skill. Any questions about that?
Also, then, like, well, Ryan's being just on that, even with Gavin, you know, sometimes like this is just automatic, but to try to get what's going on with them is like they don't, Ryan doesn't even, it just makes them more frustrated the more questions you're asking them. So and he's still, you know, you kind of throw stuff out there and then he'll just latch on to whatever and say, okay, yeah, because
sure,
of that.
it's that.
When it really isn't, because, you know, he's still having the issue. So what do you do with kids like that that are harder
Well,
to...
what you do...
Even though you know their whole life story.
What you do with kids like that is you watch. right? You know, if the questions are overwhelming, well, there's two things you can do. You can keep asking, but ask in a way that's out of like, you're not in trouble, we're just talking, we're trying to help you. And it may take a million of those conversations before he believes you. And I think at this point,
Ryan already,
he does, but at first he didn't. He was like, nope, nothing, right? You can also, like I was saying, if it's a school, if the behavior's at school, you know, ask them questions. Ask them who, what, where, why, when. You know, don't just accept that the teacher's telling you he's being defiant. That's not enough. You know, we want to know exactly what. We're trying to untangle this puzzle. Right?
And it's like, you can look at it also like this, like, Ryan, like, has a hard time communicating his feelings when I ask him a direct question, and oftentimes will latch on to, like, an idea if I throw one out.
Right.
So then we would look at the possible lagging skills behind that, language processing, you know? And so that's going to inform, and, like, we will get to the intervention and the planning part of it, of how we are going to intervene with it. So we should ask for patience for another day.
I mean, this came up in the class yesterday.
Yeah.
People are still feeling like we need to know what to do now. What's happening now?
But
We don't have the luxury of time to go through this whole cycle. But once you kind of start to figure out the kid, it happens more automatic. Like once you've had a kid in your home for like a year, you really do start to know their lagging skills, even if you don't realize that. Even if we're calling them that and you've been calling them something else all along, you know what sets off your kids. You know how they react when they're upset. Right.
It's just a different way of kind of, it's just like the same framework we're just trying to really get a grasp on in terms of how we're going to look at this. And it's going to really inform how we plan. You know, like we said last time, like our explanation guides our intervention. We're still working at the explanation part of this because it's really important that we have that super solid before we start to guide our intervention.
So here's another set of examples, and I want you to ignore what I wrote over here because I'm going to ask you to help me turn these into language. Okay, who, what, where, and when. We have a kid who's spitting at other kids on the school bus. Okay, do we know who? Do we know where? Do we know what? Do we know when? Sort of. We know that it's happening on the bus. We know it's happening with other kids. We know that he's angry, so he's spitting, or she. We have a biter, a slapper. And
Yeah.
we have a kid who came in with this reputation. She slaps adults. Like she's 6 years old, and we call her the slapper. But I'm this tall, and she's this tall.
No,
she's
gonna
get
slap
you
you
down there. So we're asking the foster parent, we're like, what is that? And she's having a honeymoon period too, so the parent is like, oh, she's fine, she isn't going to slap me, and everyone's like, yeah, right. She'll get you, she'll get down there. She'll get you down there. She'll be all, help me tie my shoe.
There you go.
But it's kind of like, you know, we've got her pigeonholed in this behavior, but we don't really know the who, what, where, why, and when about why she's doing that.
Exactly.
Right? And we don't know the lagging skill yet, so we're just trying to help the parent, like, be on the lookout, look for clues, get your Sherlock Holmes hat on or whatever.
On the bus also, it could be that they're not used to confined areas, or they were always locked in their room and they couldn't get out, so when they're in the bus, they feel that anxiety, so then they act out in certain ways.
Who knows? Like, what lagging skills could be associated with this?
So what I heard you say was that was emotional regulation, because like if it made him anxious to be on the bus, that might be part of it.
Maybe some interacting
Yeah,
skills.
could be relating and interacting with others.
Yeah. He's getting bullied and he doesn't know what to say, so it's some language, you know, putting things into words. Who knows? We don't know, but we're guessing. We're trying to look at it in that lens.
But wouldn't other scenarios, right, like help understand that one?
Yes.
You know, not necessarily spitting, but let's say he gets an argument with foster brother or something like that that looks similar.
Yeah. Then we're starting to notice a pattern. So here's when he's short-circuiting. He's able to handle himself these times and these times, but these other times he can't. Why? You know, we're looking at why. So let's say we have a kid who's yelling, screaming, banging his head on the wall over and over again at bedtime. Not the rest of the day, just at bedtime. Okay. Are we seeing a pattern? Are we seeing a who, what, where, and when? You know, is that more specific than just he has tantrums? You know, well, he has it at bedtime, and here's what he's doing, and we're at home, and he's in his room. So that could be like an emotional regulation thing. He doesn't know how to calm himself down at night. I mean, how many of you have had kids that have trouble going to bed?
And all the kids with the sexual abuse, that's what it is.
It's a famous symptom at this point. You know, it's like we pretty much expect it.
Yeah.
Let's say we have a kid who's never ready on time in the morning after school or before school. She goes to night school. That could have to do with organization. It could have to do with some kind of trigger about school. We don't know, but we know we're looking at who, what, where, and when. Not just she's defiant in the morning.
It could be emotional regulation, but you know, all that stress of getting up, getting ready, and everybody else has a routine. And
You've had kids that struggled with that. There was that kid who was hitting people in the car, and just he couldn't handle all the commotion around the house. And that kid, extremely cognitively inflexible. I would call him a purebred of cognitive inflexibility. Like he was so had this internal clock about everything. He couldn't handle that there's all these kids running around, and it just wasn't the structure not for him. So he acted out. He would get dysregulated, and he would start throwing fits. Other kids don't want to play with the youth because he or she is being controlling or right? Like, tell me, give me some who, what, where, and when about this. Somebody.
Tommy all the time.
Yeah.
All
What does he do?
Matt, he's the only one talking. He's the only one telling everybody what the rules are. It's him.
Does he change the rules as they go?
Yeah. I remember when I first started working with Tom and Gab. You guys have. I just realized that we have. Yeah.
Oh,
So we have.
Third brother.
Yeah. So when I first started working, when I like would. No, it's okay. When I would cover for Margaret, like they reminded me of old grandpas, you know, who really just needed to get their, like, you know, like Gavin was going to be like, no, Tommy, this is how you push the cart, or like, and that's like the bossing, and like they would one up each other, like, no, Gavin, this is how you're supposed to do it, man. Like that's constantly, it really reminds me of them, that one.
So, yeah, I can't tell you how many incident reports you wrote about games going wrong at Boys and Girls Club for those two boys. So you ended up hitting the staff on the head with the pool cue because why? Because of who, what, where, and when.
They were playing it wrong.
We were playing, and then this kid cut in line in front of Tommy, and then so I was playing him, and I was already mad at him, and then he cheated, and this and that, and it was my turn, and I said we were only playing for 7 minutes, and he tried to play for 10. And, you know, I mean, it's like next thing you know, he's hitting somebody on the head with a pool cue. Not okay. So if we think about his flexibility issues and go in a time machine back in time, we maybe work on that with him before he starts spending time at the club, or after the first couple incident reports, we go, okay, whoa, I don't need to write 20 more to know we have a pattern here, and what are we going to do about it? I mean, the follow-up to the incident reports that I was doing at the time was sitting Gavin down and being like, okay, you know you're not supposed to hit people with pool cues, right? What are we going to do different next time? And he's like, not hit somebody. I didn't teach him any skills. I didn't acknowledge that you have flexibility issues. How do I help you build that? And maybe I can't help him build that, but I can help him know when I go into a game, I am the inflexible one. And that's okay. That's who I am. I need to just limit myself, or I need to do these activities, not these activities that are going to trigger me, or something. You know, just going with this knowledge and helping these kids understand that this is a hard thing for them, and that's okay. You know, that gets them ready to work on it. Does that make sense?
One of my kids, Mr. Charlie, at the Boys and Girls Club, he was having always a lot of issues. And I think a lot of it was, and it happens to a lot of our kids, is there's not that much structure there. And when they don't have a structure there, it's unbalanced.
I totally agree.
So now
we
that I
make
have
structure.
Now that I have him in Sunday school, I don't have any issues anymore.
Yeah.
And everybody like he's walking off and and no arguing, no fighting, no controlling the situation. I'm not having any of that in Sunday school.
Because imagine, like, because I think that what a lot of that is about is the cognitive flexibility.
Yeah.
And so when we have kids that have, you know, when cognitive flexibility is their big lagging skill, it's we need to know that it's going to be very hard when they go into a chaotic environment because I can't just go with the flow when it's chaos. Like, where's
it's anarchy, and they're trying to build a government. You know what I mean? They're like, no, we need. I'm going to be the president. You're going to be my lackey.
That's right.
It's totally what they do.
But it's also getting to know your kid, because then we have to learn what our kid, Boys and Girls Club, it isn't unstructured. It's for kids to be there after school in a safe environment. They're not a daycare. They're not, as we're Sun program, it is much more structured, and they have much more, you're going there to a certain class. You know what I mean? It's like the boys, but at the same time, it's like we want our kids' liberty of being able to be around other children. Well, do you want unstructured or do you want structured? And we're responsible for looking
what's going to work.
Well, and it's about, I think, structuring it so that they can build those skills. Like with Ryan B., we figured out at one point Boys and Girls Club was too much. And then we were like, okay, well, his skills trainer will go with him and help out, and then over time he's able to go and do fine. But it was like, it took time and it took adjusting and like only having him go a couple days a week or whatever. And then pretty soon he was better adjusted to it.
But I also know not to send Tommy to the same area where Ryan's at, because they trigger each other.
And they can't.
Right. So Tommy doesn't go to the Regent Boys and Girls Club. He stays at Blazers because they're looking out for him more.
They understand him more. They know what to look for. They know the red flags.
And they're not getting frustrated with him anymore. I remember like a year ago, there was this ongoing battle because we would show up, like I would show up for a visit or Alfred would show up to pick him up and Tommy wouldn't come for like 10 minutes. And the club staff would get really frustrated and be like, Tommy, you need to come when I call you. It's a big deal. But in Tommy's mind, and I'm not saying this was admissible, I'm just saying with lagging skills, Tommy's saying, but I'm in the middle of a basketball game and I can't stop. Like, this isn't a good time for me to stop, and my best solution is to just not respond to being called. And then this club member is like yelling at him, and through Tommy's mind, he's being rude to me, so that's why I yelled at him. And next thing you know, he's in trouble for yelling at the club staff. You know what I mean? Yeah, he's got to call you. So I mean, if you look, you're looking at the who, what, where, why, when, and going deeper. So how do we work on this with Tommy? How do we figure out how to get him willing to come, or like, do we say when we arrive you have 5 minutes or some, you just got to kind of figure out.
Call him ahead of time.
Isn't it still?
Yeah, call him ahead of time, but
Isn't it
don't
with-
start a new game.
With Tommy and some of the other kids that have the OCD, it's like, it's not about, okay, I have to be ready 5 minutes before. It's like, even if he starts something, no matter how early he starts it, he has to follow all the way through until he's finished with it, and he's only focused on that. How do you get him out of that, if it's something already in his head that, his OCD stuff?
I mean, I don't know if you can in that moment. You have to decide, I'm either going to impose my will, which is plan A, or I'm going to let it go, which is plan C, and then address it with him not in the heat of the moment, and go, this is happening a lot, and I'm not sure why, and you have to narrow down, what are my concerns about having to wait that 5 minutes? Like, when I was in FCC, I didn't have 5 extra minutes to wait anywhere, and I know as parents, you don't always have that either, So it's like, well, my time is valuable, and when I come to see you, I need to see you, or maybe I'm just being impatient. I don't know, but we figure out what our concern is, and then that's our entry point to talking to him about why we need a solution to our shared problem. Is that I'm worried about, my time, you're worried about your game ending. How do we solve this problem?
And that's what we will.
And that's, we're jumping ahead, that's here. That's when we go from planning into intervention.
Yeah, I promise.
I know I keep on doing.
No, it's okay.
That's what I'm
It's okay, because I want to know why you
like,
keep these in
what do we
mind
do in the
when
moment?
we're there.
Exactly. So, moving on, let's plow ahead, and before we get into our activity, which I'm excited to do with you guys, because you really do seem to be getting this pretty well, just a few reminders that challenging behaviors are highly predictable. The same things tend to happen again and again, right? I mean, I know you see that I know you see the patterns and the triggers after a kid's been with you a little while. And we learn valuable information from the patterns that we see. That's where we get our assessment information so we can plan and we can intervene. And it's actually another motto of CPS that challenging behaviors are highlighted. Realize that this whole process is kind of confusing. We just want to remind you before we go into the activity that we want to focus on pinpointing very specific problems to be solved rather than focusing on the lagging skills. We don't want the lagging skills to be our new dead-end explanations. Oh, well, he has cognitive inflexibility issues.
Oh, he has mom issues.
That's not enough. We want to know who, what, where, when, and we want to, like, you know, really have something identified, something tangible identified that we can work on. We're not just trying to label kids with these specific lagging skills. We're trying to be accurate and compassionate about what's hard for them, okay? We're also trying to understand the why. You know, why are they exhibiting challenging behavior? We're trying to solve problems in the lagging skills provided. So, we are going to, should I change the order there too? We're going to pull out a vignette called Luke. Okay. And I need a few volunteers to maybe help read this out loud. Anybody's willing? Share your reading skills with the group.
I'll read.
Okay, that's good. You want to just read the first Luke's history, and then we'll have someone else read the first part?
Fine, Luke first.
Oh.
Just that should be on top.
Looks like this. There it is.
Luke was placed in DHS foster care at age 11 when he was picked up for being a runaway. His parents are drug addicted and he does not have any contact with them. Growing up, he had to deal with a lot of violence and unpredictability. His mom used to lock him in the basement for hours on end with no lights on. His dad had a very unpredictable temper and would hit him frequently. Luke first began running away at age 9. He would stay with friends and their parents. He had a hard time keeping up with school, despite being very bright. He was suspended multiple times for having tantrums related to conflicts with peers and power struggling with teachers over routines and classroom expectations. Foster care did not go well for Luke because he was inflexible about the rules, would have major blowouts, and couldn't maintain in school. He went through several foster homes, and no one knew what to do with him. So he was moved into therapeutic foster care.
Anyone want to read the second part?
Luke is 14. Luke's whole world revolves around skateboarding. It is his passion in life, and he is very talented at it. He used to skateboard with his older brother, who was a big support to him. He has lived with Marianne and Ed for a little over a month. Ed works swing shifts, so Marianne spends every afternoon and evening one-on-one with Luke. They do okay, but mainly because Marianne walks on eggshells around him. She is aware of his tendency to power struggle and explode. She is trying to just maintain the peace and allow him to settle in. Luke has done very well with the most of the household routine. He likes routines. He expects the same things to happen at the same times every day. In fact, when they don't, it can make him very upset. So Marianne tries to keep things routine. She also likes things that way. Marianne has been stressed lately because there are certain rules that Luke won't acknowledge. One is that he talks to several unapproved friends on her phone. He also recently got approval to get dropped off at the skate park for 1 hour in the afternoons. When Marianne arrives to pick him up, he won't come to the car, and she ends up waiting another hour. Also, Luke won't go anywhere without a skateboard. As a gift from his brother, it is very important to him. Most of the time it isn't a problem, but recently he hit another youth in the face with it at school when the youth made a comment about his mother. So the school won't let him bring it. And Marianne is not uncomfortable with him having the skateboard on him during potentially triggering events.
So, where we're going with this, we want to start listing what do you hear in this scenario as triggers, patterns, and problems. If you were his foster parent, what would you see as like some triggers, patterns, and problems that we want to work on? And if you see any lagging skills jumping out at you, let me know that as well. We're just going to start brainstorming on the board here. Kind of assess this kid together, okay?
asking to leave the skate park. At the end of consideration.
Okay.
Change and transition article.
Okay.
Power struggles.
What does he power struggle about? Who, what, where, when?
Okay. Talking to unapproved friends on the phone.
I see a problem with an unsecured foster parent.
So a problem to be solved would be that Mary Ann
Get a backbone.
feels that she's afraid to set him off because he gets really emotional. So,
That she's intimidated by the child.
yes. And what does she find intimidating? Exactly.
His explosions and reactions.
Tantrums.
Power
Okay.
struggles.
So what lagging skills do you think that relates to for him? I mean, we could list
nine
Mary Ann's
yards.
regulation. What's that?
Emotional
Emotional regulation. So she's
regulation.
afraid of his emotional regulation.
Yeah.
Could it be that Mary Ann is actually a trigger for him? Could he have mom issues? I mean, there is something in here about the reason he hit that kid with the skateboard is because he said something about his mom. So mom stuff, I would go ahead and say mom stuff is a trigger.
Seems
Potential
like,
trigger.
and he had a hard time keeping up at school, and he is getting in trouble at school with his skateboard.
And he's unflexible.
Yes, he is.
He expects the same thing to happen.
Good, that's a good one, Deborah. So we've got,
He's inflexible about the rules.
He's inflexible about the rules, absolutely.
so much is getting thrown out. Okay, what else? What else do we see here?
He won't go anywhere without a skateboard. So,
And why is that a problem to be solved?
Safety.
Safety, and I would say some places have rules that you can't have things like, right? Like, it's kind of amazing the school even lets him have it in class.
Yeah.
You know, maybe he goes to a special school. I don't know. When I think about that, I was like, for sure. So his attachment to his skateboard is a problem to be solved. And that's a trigger. I mean, she's probably walking on eggshells because if she tries to take it away, what's going to happen? You know, he's new to her home, she's trying to build a relationship. So her tactic, which we, you know, like Laverne is saying, is pretty passive. Her tactic is to just kind of let him, like, she's going easy on him, which.
That's even worse because he's used to, he wants routine, he wants.
And she wants routine too.
And it seems like she's kind of letting him settle in, but she's not teaching him that settling in is kind of being a part of a system, family, group, whatever.
And that in CPS, our concerns are just as important as the child's
I don't think this was a good match.
concerns. No? Tell me.
Because I think, you know, Mary Ann, she's not a good match for him. Maybe the dad would be, but not her.
So the problem to be solved might be the schedule,
Yeah,
the
for
fact
sure.
that the dad is, like
Right.
that Luke and her are one-on-one at home. Because if we had known when he came in, for example, that mom stuff is a trigger, we might not have placed him in a home where he'd be one-on-one
And
with
not
a mom.
just that, see, he has issues with the rules because she's not enforcing it, and so he's taking advantage of that situation. Like, for example, he calls unapproved individuals on the phone, and he's not supposed to do that. And then when she went to pick him up, you see what he did? He did, I think you mentioned that, didn't you? He gave an example of, right.
Well,
He wouldn't come right out. He ended up spending an hour. That wasn't you, that was somebody.
No, it was. Like I was saying how we would show up at Boys and Girls Club. So,
He also, it says so, I don't know where you put this in or if it's, but that, he had to deal with a lot of violence and unpredictability and a bad temper from his dad. So would that go anywhere? Would that be?
I think it's factors that probably contributed to his lagging
Why?
skills.
Okay.
He, why he maybe needs some structure, why he maybe is afraid if someone else has control, they might hurt him. The point is, this is all deeper than what we see on the surface. Like Deborah, you're mentioning how she makes her way to the car, or he makes her way to the, he doesn't come, which probably feels kind of defiant or manipulative, but we don't know his reason there. I mean, yes, it's not fair to Mary Ann, which reflects a lagging skill around, one of the social lagging skills is realizing your impact on others, right? He's not thinking about, she has to wait for me, and then dinner's late for everybody because I wouldn't come to the car. He might have some other whole crazy reason why he doesn't come to the car, and it might not be just to get back at her. It might be because he's embarrassed, or he's waiting for a certain friend to show up who doesn't come until later, and that's who he wants to see. I mean, we don't know. We have to ask questions. And it's not okay, because she has a valid concern that, you can't be making your way to the car. We either need to change what time you're going to be there, or we need to figure this out together.
Yeah, we still, and that's what we'll kind of do, is how to get more information from the child, because like we said, these are areas where you can get information on the assessment and planning. We're going to get more information from the child as well.
And we are going to, for the next few weeks, be talking about Luke and which of these is a priority, okay? And which of these are we going to have to plan? How are we going to plan B some of these things? How would it look to sit down and talk with him about the problem waiting in the car?
And one skill that we didn't talk about being taught that I can see in a couple areas would be, he talks about improved parental cell phone. He's asked to leave the skate park, which causes blowouts. If he maybe asked and used his language, could this have gone a different way? So I'm wondering if maybe we're looking at a language processing deficit at the same time.
And again, these are hypotheses. We don't know exactly. He's new to the home. We're just starting to see some patterns, and Mary Ann is being very, just walking on eggshells, which may not be the best. I mean, you can either be too hard on kids, or you can be too soft on kids. And there's a balance in the middle. And CPS, there's room for both in CPS.
Yeah, I mean, you're welcome to write it on there. Or you
the
can
idea is there's a time and place to impose your will and say, I need to have it this way. My concern is so huge, and this is such a big safety issue that I need you to do what I need you to do. And we can talk about your concerns about that later, but right now, I need you to put down the water cooler and not throw it at me. Right, Anna?
Yeah.
That
triggers my kid right there.
I'm sure it does. I'm sure it does. And like it or not, you need her to do that.
Right.
On the other hand, there are going to be times that you're going to say to yourself, what is my concern? Is it big enough where I really need to go there right now? Which of these things would you guys say is a priority? Hitting with the skateboard. So what do we do about that? I mean, that really is a problem to be solved, because he's super attached to this object, but when he's triggered about his mom, or maybe other times too, all we know so far, the only time he's ever hit somebody with it was when a kid said something about his mom. So what do we do?
What I would do, I would find out why the teacher or the school allow him to have the skateboard in class.
Are you walking on eggshells?
Well,
Yeah,
let's
I was
just
gonna
say, they might be, let's just say he goes to Pioneer Annex. Based on a real kid who does. Well, let's just say they allow him because they know how much it means to him. They do CPS there. They understand he's triggered when he doesn't have it because he panics when he's not around his brother. Like, his brother is his one steady in his life, and the skateboard represents. If you want to get into ego psychology, it's object relations. The skateboard represents his brother. It's his teddy bear.
That doesn't seem like the main problem to me, though.
Tell
I
me.
mean, for me, it's that Mary Ann can't ask for anything of this kid. And that would cause just disarray in my family.
Right.
That one parent cannot parent alone. That's hard.
So what do you do?
I think Dad or foster dad needs to come in and kind of like do some, what's going on, how are you feeling?
With Marianne or with,
No, with
the youth?
With him.
So help interpret.
Yeah, kind of just find out some more information. and
He
see what
might
that
be the
does.
better person to do the
Yeah,
drilling
right.
down.
Exactly.
Remember the slide we showed where you've got the arrows and the,
Yeah.
you see this behavior, you're shoving peers. It looks like it's mainly happening in line, like dad's the one that figures out when and where and why,
Yeah.
and then what's the lagging skill.
So what
and then
you,
he tells
and
Marianne.
also what you can do with
That
that
helps with our family.
is like, so like what I hear you say is like this broad thing is that Marianne like seems, you know, like her interactions with him, it seems like whenever she says no, there's a problem. So we want to choose something on here where this happens that maybe isn't like, you know, as big as like someone getting hit in the face with a skateboard.
Even though that's a priority,
Yeah.
But like we're starting to build the foundation. So what I would look at, and this is where we could go, is to, you know, having that figured out or dealing with that problem around the talking to unapproved friends with a cell phone.
That's a good one.
It's called
what do you
low-hanging
do
fruit.
if you want a kid approved on a phone? If you want someone on your phone list, what do they have to do?
Let their talk to the
Yeah, that's pretty easy, right? Unless there's a reason why they were going to say no, or if they have a caseworker that's really strict or something, but it's a quicker fix. Were you going to say something?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say that Marianne could possibly talk to him. Like you said, she's walking up there, she'll kind of intimidated by the youth, but if she kind of communicates with him and finds out, you know, some of the things he likes or doesn't like, or why he carries himself. I mean,
So break
the
the ice.
skateboard, just kind of finding out from him if he's willing to talk.
Yeah, because they're both just kind of looking at each other and not
Right,
interacting. They're in the car silent driving home after she's waited an hour. You know, and like he doesn't know what to say, she doesn't know what to say. And her lagging skills are playing a part here, and that's important because we all have them. And we all are going to have kids in our care that like maybe don't match our, you know, I mean, and maybe the husband has different skill set, or maybe Marianne's skills are just challenged with this kid because she knows he's triggered by her, so she's trying to like back off.
And some of the stuff we might not know before kids get placed in their home. I mean, Lindsay seriously tries her best to make sure the most appropriate kid is going to be in your home. But
She
some of the stuff,
asks a lot of questions.
some of the stuff is going to spill out once the kid is already placed in your home. And it might be like, oh my goodness, like, I am super cognitively inflexible, and that happens. And so is this kid, what am I going to do? So like, but we are lucky where we have brains where our frontal cortex is, you know, going to be more formed than the kids.
Right.
We're going to be able to stop, you know, collaborate, listen, and you know, chill out for a second before we go and do the intervention with the kid. And that's up film now.
So what? Just kind of going back to prioritizing. Okay, just to point out the relationship here. We've gone from assessing, splashing down all this information, to now we're sort of into planning, right? We're thinking, okay, which of these are the biggest priorities right now? And what are we going to do? And kind of along the lines of what Anna was saying was like, this is a huge giant problem. Marianne and Luke don't have good rapport yet. They haven't quite gotten there. So it might be helpful to do what we call pick a low-hanging fruit. You got this tree full of problems. You've got things way on top that you need the ladder to get to, and you could maybe start with something smaller down at the bottom of the tree, or even that fell on the ground already, or it's maybe at the market in the produce. And the idea is that you want to start with, if you don't have the rapport with the youth yet, or they're too triggered by the thing that you're trying to approach, can you break this down into something smaller? Can you talk to him, like your idea was actually great, talk to him about why is this skateboard important to you? Like build a relationship on that, you know. And meanwhile, maybe approach him about the phoneless thing as your starting point, because that's something he wants. He's got an investment in that. He wants to talk to his friends. You don't want to stop him from talking to his friends, but you have to follow Maple Star's rules too about not letting him talk to people that he's not supposed to, right?
And, you know, and as we'll talk about this next week and the weeks to come, is that as you're solving the problem around this, we are building skills with his emotional regulation, with his language processing, and his cognitive flexibility by the problem-solving process. So you're already building skills that are also applicable up here. Does that make sense?
I'm also going to put on here that I think he has social thinking lagging skills, because if you look at this form, which again is your cheat sheet of what all the lagging skills kind of look like. Under social thinking skills, relating and interacting, seeing how your behavior affects others, right? He's not purposely trying, we don't know, it seems like he's maybe blowing Marianne off and just being like, you can wait for me, I don't care. But really, maybe he just doesn't realize how much that's impacting her and the rest of the family. Like I was saying earlier, she's got to get home and make dinner for him and anybody else in the household, grandma or whatever. And he's not realizing, like, whatever he, let's say he wants to stay there because that friend is going to show up or some girl he likes is going to show up. He doesn't want to leave. He's so focused on that he's not seeing how he's affecting others.
Or he doesn't care because it's not a priority for
It's
him.
not a priority for him.
What's important to him is not what's important to him.
And that's where the plan B comes in, where you figure out what's the priority to him, what is his concern. Okay, he wanted to see this girl, he's got a crush on her, he wants her to see him skateboard and everything, that's his thing. And then Marianne gets a chance to bring up her concern and like, well, that's great, I totally understand that now. I didn't understand why you were making me wait. I'm still not okay with you making me wait, but I understand that that's why you wanted to be there. Now what about my side of the problem where like I don't have time to wait in the car for an hour, so what are we going to do about this? And then he helps come up with solutions, and in doing that, he is building all these skills. It's kind of amazing.
Could it also be that kid at the Boys and Girls Club that wouldn't come because the speaker?
It could be.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
what would that fall under?
Cognitive flexibility.
Okay.
He can't transition. He absolutely can't. Maybe he can now, but he's
She's
just
gotten better at it, but there's a recent blowout, and when Alfred happened recently with Maple Star again, and Alfred called him, time to go, it was a little bit earlier than what we usually go pick him up, and we didn't know, or no, Alfred didn't know that the FCP had just taken up, and Alfred's like, what's wrong, Tommy? He noticed Tommy was anxious, and he's like, what's wrong? And he just went off on Alfred, and just went off, and I called Maple Star, I said, what the hell did you say to him, or do to him, or say, because, and eventually, when Alfred got home, because Alfred called me, he's like, I'm done with this kid, I'm not dealing with him anymore, and I talked to Marissa, so we're talking, and then when I get home, Alfred's like, he was upset because he didn't have enough time to play. And again, Alfred's again telling him, why can't you just say that? I know you already, I see the anxiety in you, why can't you just use your verbal
why
speech
can't
and tell
he?
me?
Why can't he?
And that hadn't happened in a long
And
time.
how do we get him to? How do we help him? Because we know at this point, you've known him long enough. I've known him. Many of you have known this kid long enough where we know it's not realistic to expect him to just drop things and leave. Like he can't do that. But maybe we can build the skills for him to say that out loud instead of having this big outburst or whatever's going on. So, I mean, how do we build those skills? It sounds like Alfred is maybe opening up that discussion and maybe a plan B kind of thing. I think with this particular kid, he's so used to adults like, imposing their will on him that he doesn't, my experience with him, and I knew him well for years, he still was reluctant to ever tell me what he really thought and felt. And part of it was skills and part of it was trust. Like he's just been trained by all these, moves he's had to make, and his mom asking him to keep secrets and things. He's learned to keep his mouth shut.
But
And
how
so
do you,
that's tough.
how do you get past that? Because that's where we're at.
The kid's continually trying to use relationship and rapport to get in there.
And
And
have
I
that
think
rapport with Alfred.
The reassuring, the kind of like, I know I'm angry at you when we're talking about this because we had a scene at Boys and Girls Club, the talking during the calm moments and really just reassuring him and validating like, whatever you feel is okay with me, I promise. Even though I have a need too, how you feel and what you see is fine. And you may have to repeat that broken record style until he gets it. Maybe he'll never get it.
And that's hard to do when there's so many people involved and he's telling people so many different things.
Yeah.
And
It
that's,
gets messy. This is messy and confusing, and it's not going to be as clean and cut. And we'll be doing like, this will be twisted on the side, and we'll be like working on one skill over here and something over here. And we're not saying that this is like the absolute like simple ABC answer, but it's part of the process and is what's going to really help us like kind of crack that shell.
And so, like in that incident at the club, I mean, I know you have to do whatever you have to do in the moment, and Alfred's going to be frustrated in the moment. Totally understand. Been there. At some point, looking at, like as a service team or whatever, looking at what are the problems to be solved here? What was the who, what, when, and where about the situation? And then what were the skills that were missing? And then figuring out the plan to approach them, which is all we're talking about next week, is getting into what are our options when we have a problem to solve, an unmet expectation. We've figured out what seems to be hard for the child, what's the best way to approach it, who is going to approach it, and what do we do?
I kind of use like a negotiation. It's like, you know, again, you pick and choose your battles, but like with Matt, in the beginning with the Kindle, it's like, well, you can't do Kindle today because it's already too late. And he'll be like, why? And so I decided, you know what, instead of trying to figure out how to help fix that, so I would now I just tell him, you know what, you only have a half an hour today, but on Saturday you can have your other half hour, so it'll be, you know, and he, okay. And it was just like, it's so easy.
Yeah.
So easy. It's like, why struggle so much with the
Right.
kid when it's something that is not, you know, something that
you figured out a way based on his lagging skill. You've modified your expectations.
And sometimes, yeah, we're definitely going to get into that next week. And sometimes that might work for your household, but sometimes that might be something that's not negotiable. Like, we need to be asleep at 9 o'clock in our house because, like, Dad works at 3 o'clock in the morning or has to get up and go bake. You know, and so then, like, what do we do around that? And we will talk definitely more about, like, what, thinking of where your expectations are coming from, what's not negotiable, but, like, that doesn't really matter to me if he uses a Kindle on Saturday or half an hour a day. Like, that's not a big deal. And it's not like you're, like, giving in. It's not that it makes you, like, a soft, or anything like that, because this is just, you can go back and discuss it later. And ask why this is a problem.
It's kind of about just realizing all of your concerns won't be addressed in the moment. You're going to have to let some of it go and realize I'm going to solve this with the kid later. I can't get anywhere right now.
But sometimes we do things and we don't realize how good we're doing. And yesterday something happened because we had him for a couple hours at our house, and I was really impressed. Because in the past, when he didn't understand anything, it would be a blowout. But yesterday he was telling us, I'm confused. I don't understand. Because Rosalind was like, it's dinner time, you need to eat. I don't want to eat. Well, either you eat now or you color now. He's like, what? I don't understand what you're telling me. Do I color or do I eat? Or what? He was using his words, and I was like, wow.
That's
He
great.
was still upset. He was still sitting down, but he wasn't blowing out. He wasn't being rude. He wasn't like beside himself. He was just, I'm confused. And she's like, what are you confused about? It's eat or cut? And I said, it says autism. He's not even connected. He was shutting down, but he wasn't acting the way he did. So the work that you work on is blowing short.
That's awesome.
And I was really impressed.
Yay.
Laverne, did you have a question earlier?
Well, I think I have a statement. I think I forgot the question because it's been so long.
Sorry, I didn't.
But I have a statement because I'm not actually sure where we're trying to get the kids to. Because I know some of these kids have fears of getting better. And I know that your triangle kind of listed them as children that will not get to a normal or a better.
They could.
And some of them are afraid to get to better because they are established. Some of them are established and they come a long way and they have a good home. And that's the forbidden rule in therapeutic, because if you get better and if you become normal, then you have to leave.
That's a good point.
And then when you leave, because I'm saying this out of experience, when you leave and they take you away because you have gotten better, and then they put you somewhere else, and then 2 years later they bring you back, and you're unhelpable then. Because they brought you back, they took you away, and they're confusing you.
And you feel like
At
you
this
failed, but you also
So now I will never get better. You can't convince me to get better
And I stay here.
because I'll leave if I get better. And so that's something that really bothers me, because do we want them to get better? And there has to be an in-between, going through a therapeutic home, getting better, there has to be something in the middle, and I don't think anybody's looking at the middle.
Yeah.
There should be something placed in the middle rather than moving them out into another home to restart over again, because the work is in vain.
Well, I think with CPS, was the work true? Was it really, I mean, I know you are an amazing parent and you did amazing things with that child. Maybe we didn't quite get to all the things underneath, and that's why when that child left, they didn't do well and they had to come back. If we're really using the model and we're really being true to it, we're going to address those exact questions. We're going to come up with, why are you afraid to leave? Why are you afraid to get better? We're going to get to that. Because we're going to dig
Something
down.
they never had
Yeah.
before.
And maybe that's a matter
Security.
of talking to them about, like, how can we, I know there's things we have no control of, like the system is crazy and you're going to have to leave and
Right.
get better. I can't change that. But how can we stay in touch? Is there a way that we can stay in touch, or we can arrange for you to come and, you know, come over for breakfast on Saturdays or something? You know, I mean, like,
Because I've known
it's about talking about it, because it's going to be a different, it's going to be
But that's
different
my situation with
specifics for
Brian.
every single kid. I mean, and you guys adopt and keep every kid you have. So
Mm-hmm.
that's their solution
I
to the
understand what she's saying
problem.
though. I understand what she's saying, because with Ryan, after you left, Chelsea was like, okay, well, Maple Star wants to know when he's doing better now, when can we drop him down to DHS? Since Maple Star knew I'm keeping him, it's like, it was just like, bam, bam, okay, you're out, you're in DHS now, which I'm still doing therapeutic
I'm
for
sure you
Ryan.
are.
and that's
And that's going to be for a long, and I understand the part where that's something that is, life is
Stable.
He's stable, but he's still, you know. But if he would have been taken out of my house and put into a regular DHS,
Absolutely not. I know, it's a weird trap to be in.
It's like you win and then you lose.
And my house is not big enough to keep.
It's not, you guys need a hotel, an empty hotel.
And I would say that I have seen situations like where it isn't necessarily follow that same protocol. Lisa, who's actually not watching this video, she talks about kids coming and visiting for dinner. You know, and it's like the people are like kids that we even think we didn't make like a tiny difference in, because we were working with like the juvenile kids on like with Multnomah County with the gang kids. They'll still call her up and be like, hey, what are you doing? This is what I'm doing, you know.
Got
And
a job in the neighborhood.
yeah. And what I also go, you know, telling like, I really feel like being therapeutic foster parents, you have the ability to help so many different kids and be mentors in their lives and be a part, like, be that person who is the first person who has a relationship with them. You know, it might be that you have to move on. It might be that you're not going to be my house forever. That's okay. That doesn't mean you can't call me. That doesn't mean that I can't see you. That doesn't mean we can't be Facebook friends and we can check in or you know, it doesn't mean, it's just a different relationship, you know.
I heard a second part to what you said that I don't want to let slip by. You said that now that she left and came back, it's almost like she's unteachable. She's unfixable.
Only because she knew that she had to be out of control
Right.
in order
Right.
to stay.
She got, well, and how I would rephrase that is she got more broken by the process. So now we have double the work to do, right? It's like, many of you have probably dealt with kids that like transitioned home and we kind of knew they shouldn't, but DHS was like, put them back anyway. I'm going to make you cry again. I'm not going to make you cry.
Even with Ryan,
Yeah.
fix it to that.
You know, they
Went
went
back
home
to
and it
the-
failed, and then they come back or they go back into the system and we're like, please bring them back to me. And the worker's like, no, we have to put them over here or whatever. Like, they get lost in the mix and they get a negative message reinforced again and again, which compromises their lagging skills farther. Doesn't mean
Right.
we can't crack it, but eventually there does come a time where the kid may shut down so much that it feels impossible to crack them open and give them hope and build that relationship, because they're like, you're just my 51st home that I've been to, and what do you care? I'm just going to leave anyway. Why should I attach to you? You know what I mean? Like the message gets deeper and deeper. So what we're trying to do overall with CPS is build a quality relationship with these kids while we can, which is very challenging when they're acting out and trying to resist that on many levels. They're doing a lot of things to tear these relationships down. But our job is to try to have as much empathy and like a balance between the empathy and kind of the guidance and authority. I hate to use that word because I don't want to run with that word, but we are in charge of them. We are here to keep them safe and be in charge, but we want to be in charge in a way that's empathetic and that our concern and their concern is equally important.
It's a first example of a loving, it may be the first example of a true loving, caring relationship that this child will have. And that's worth
Positive
That's
experience for
something,
them.
you know, like
That's when they'll
even
see
if,
those.
I don't know if I've talked about this in this class yet, but, you know, Anna and I both used to work at this different times, but we worked with teen girls and we're trying really hard, some of them were trying really hard not to love me or even like me. And many of them left under bad circumstances and there was no resolution there. Well, guess who's looking me up on Facebook and sending me pictures of their babies and like being like, thank you, I get it now. I'm doing okay and I get it now. You know, it's like for that amount of time, even though I had to say hard things to them or put my foot down or whatever, it made a difference. And I know the same has been true for you. And
I mean, even with the Maple Star, I've gotten calls from kids who I used to case manage, and it's, you know, and some kids like, you know, who were like meth users, you know, like letting me know how they're doing. And that's something I never ever thought would happen.
yeah. I have a girl, she was actually at a group home and in Maple Star who, like, I keep tabs on her on Facebook. And with some boundaries in place, but she is asking me, how do I get a job working in a program? Like, how do I help with what I've learned and what I've been through? Like, how can I get a social work job? What do I need to do? And I'm like, well, here's all the stuff you need to know. Do it, because you understand. You'll have the empathy because you've been through some of this. You know what it's like to be in foster care and still love your mom, even though she's a very unhealthy person. Like, you know those struggles that the kids go through.
Or even like Nick communicating with us. You know, he's emailed me, hasn't he?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And he's emailed Alfred and he
Yeah.
sent us letters and we're like, we didn't even know who you are.
But it's that attachment. I mean, it meant something. I don't think he'll ever forget that. That was somehow one of the most stable periods of his life, even though it felt so turbulent and we didn't feel a lot of support from his team and stuff, but we were something for him, you know. And it was in the end.
So we can probably leave early today.
Yeah, any other questions about this stuff? We're really starting to get our hands on it. And
We're going to get Luke all fixed.
we're going to fix it. We're going to wait
No,
for
no,
another one.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.